It is June, 1982. The wilderness of Siberia is a place of silence so absolute it feels heavy, a frozen expanse where the temperature drops so low that steel becomes brittle and human breath turns instantly to ice crystals. In the heart of this desolation, stretching like a severed artery across the permafrost, lies the crowning jewel of Soviet industrial ambition, the Trans-Siberian Gas Pipeline. This is not just a pipe, it is a lifeline. It is the desperate economic hope of a superpower that is slowly suffocating under the weight of its own military spending. The Soviet Union needs hard currency, and it needs to sell natural gas to Western Europe to get it. To build this colossal infrastructure, they required technology they did not possess: advanced automated control systems, complex turbines, and computer software capable of managing immense pressure across thousands of miles. And so, they did what they had done for decades. They stole it. Deep inside the control stations, the hum of Western-designed technology vibrates through the floorboards. The software running the pumps and valves is American. The microchips processing the data are Japanese and American. The Soviets believe they have pulled off the heist of the century, bypassing billions of dollars in research and development to simply lift the blueprints and the code from the West. They believe they are clever. They believe they are winning. But on this night in June, the silence of the Siberian tundra is about to be shattered by a force equal to a tactical nuclear weapon. Inside the monitoring room, a lone operator watches the gauges. Everything appears normal. The green lights flicker with the reassuring rhythm of a heartbeat. The pressure readings are within the optimal range. The stolen software is doing exactly what it was programmed to do, or rather, what the Soviets think it was programmed to do. Suddenly, without a single warning light flashing red, the turbine speeds begin to climb. The valves that should open to release pressure clamp shut. The operator taps the glass of the gauge, confused. The needle is moving into the danger zone, yet the computer screen reads, "System nominal." He frantically types commands into the terminal, trying to override the automated system. The screen ignores him. It is as if a ghost has taken hold of the controls, a phantom hand locking the doors and turning up the heat. The pressure builds, the steel groans. The gas, compressed beyond the limits of physics, seeks an escape. In the sky above, an American early warning satellite, designed to detect the thermal signature of a Soviet intercontinental ballistic missile launch, suddenly flares white-hot on the screens at NORAD headquarters in Colorado. The sensors detect a massive thermal bloom, an explosion of 3 kilotons. For a few terrifying minutes, the United States Air Force believes the Third World War has begun. They believe the Soviets have detonated a nuke. But in the Kremlin there is no finger on the button, there is only chaos. Reports flood into Moscow, disjointed and hysterical. A section of the pipeline has vanished. Not broken vanished. Vaporized in a fireball so intense it fused the surrounding sand into glass. The fire is visible from space. The Soviet leadership is paralyzed. Was it a meteorite? Was it a Chinese saboteur? Was it an accident caused by drunk workers? They scramble the KGB. They scramble the military engineers. Helicopters slice through the cold air, ferrying grim-faced generals to the edge of the crater. They stand on the rim of the devastation, staring down into the smoking ruin of their economic future. They test for radiation. Nothing. It wasn't a nuclear device. It was the gas itself. But the true horror sets in when the engineers recover the black box data logs from the surviving control nodes. They analyze the code, the stolen American code they were so proud of. They look for the error, the glitch, the mistake. They find nothing wrong. The code executed perfectly. It was instructed to destroy itself. The realization hits the KGB investigators like a physical blow. The software wasn't broken. It was a trap. They had stolen a poison pill, swallowed it, and now it was tearing them apart from the inside. But this incident, as catastrophic as it is only the beginning. It is the first loud crack in a dam that is about to burst. If you enjoy deep dives into the hidden history of the Cold War and the stories the history books often leave out, make sure to subscribe to Cold War Impact. We explore the conflict from the other side of the Iron Curtain. Back in Moscow, paranoia begins to fester like a gangrenous wound. The pipeline explosion is treated as a state secret of the highest order. The official story is construction negligence. But inside the Lubyanka, the headquarters of the KGB, the atmosphere is electric with fear. Directorate T is the KGB's scientific and technical wing. Their sole purpose is to steal Western technology aviation blueprints, computer architecture, chemical formulas, radar designs. For years they have operated with impunity, believing the West was too open, too naive, and too stupid to stop them. They have a shopping list, and they have always filled it. But now, strange reports are coming in from all corners of the Soviet military-industrial complex. A chemical plant in the Urals, built using stolen German schematics, suddenly begins producing a useless sludge instead of high-grade fertilizer. The formulas were followed to the letter. The equipment was identical, yet the output is garbage. At a secret airbase, test pilots climbing into the cockpits of the newest fighter jets, equipped with radar systems copied from American F-14 Tomcat aircraft, report phantom signals. The radar locks onto targets that aren't there. It goes blind in clear skies. The engineers tear the units apart, checking every circuit against the stolen blueprints. They match perfectly, and yet the machine is blind. In the shipyards of Severodvinsk, where the Soviet Navy is constructing their new generation of nuclear submarines, acoustical engineers are baffled. The silence of a submarine is its only defense. They have stolen the designs for American propeller blades, which are shaped to minimize cavitation and noise. They cast the blades exactly as the stolen documents describe. But when they run the tests, the propellers scream underwater, creating a noise signature that any sonar operator in the Atlantic could hear from hundreds of miles away. It is a pandemic of failure. The KGB leadership, men like Yuri Andropov, are not stupid men. They are ruthless, calculating, and deeply suspicious. They do not believe in bad luck. When one machine fails, it is an accident. When 10 machines fail, it is coincidence. When the entire technological foundation of the Red Army begins to crumble simultaneously, it is enemy action. But the terrifying question that keeps the generals awake at night is not what is happening. They know what is happening. They are being sabotaged. The question is, how? How could the Americans possibly know? The KGB's Line X, their network of tech theft spies, is considered the most secure, most elite, and most productive intelligence operation in history. They have agents in IBM, in Boeing, in General Electric, in the French aerospace industry. These agents are deep undercover. The documents they steal are top secret. For the Americans to sabotage the specific part of the code in the pipeline software or the specific alloy formula in a tank engine, they would have to know exactly what the Soviets were going to steal before they stole it. It implies a level of omniscience that is terrified. It implies that the CIA is not just reacting to Soviet moves, but anticipating them. The phantom threatens everything. The Soviet Union in the early 1980s is a giant with feet of clay. They cannot innovate fast enough to keep up with the computer revolution happening in California. They rely on theft to maintain parity. If the well of stolen tech is poisoned, they are finished. They cannot build their own microchips from scratch, they are 10 years behind. They cannot write their own advanced operating systems, they lack the base code. If they cannot trust what they steal, they cannot build new weapons. If they cannot build new weapons, they cannot maintain the balance of terror. And if they cannot maintain the balance of terror, the Americans will win. The panic in the Kremlin shifts from technical frustration to a hunt for a leak. They assume it must be electronic surveillance. The Americans must have cracked their diplomatic codes, or perhaps there is a bug in the Soviet embassy in Washington. Teams of sweepers scour the embassies. They tear out walls, rip up floorboards, and X-ray the furniture. They find nothing. They change their cipher codes. They switch to courier-only communication for sensitive technical requests. They tighten the circle of who knows what is being stolen. And still, the failures continue. A prototype space shuttle, the Buran, which bears a striking resemblance to the American NASA shuttle, encounters inexplicable aerodynamic instability in wind tunnel simulations. The heat shield tiles, copied from American ceramics, fall off under vibration tests. The KGB is chasing a ghost. They look outward, convinced the attack is coming from the CIA's technical wizards at Langley. They imagine massive American supercomputers predicting Soviet needs. They imagine laser microphones and satellite intercepts. They are looking at the horizon, searching for an external enemy. They do not look down. They do not look at the papers on their own desks. They do not look at the men sitting in the offices next to them. In the center of Moscow, in a nondescript office within the massive bureaucracy of the intelligence services, a man sits at a desk. He is a trusted officer, a loyal communist or so his file says. He has access to everything, every shopping list, Every request from the military for Western tech, every identity of every Line X spy in the world. He is the ghost. But the KGB doesn't know his name. To the few men in the West who know of his existence, he is not a ghost. He is a source. And his code name is Farewell. But to the KGB investigators scrambling in the wake of the pipeline disaster, he is invisible. They are looking for a glitch in the machine. They fail to realize the glitch is a man. The investigation turns inward, becoming a cannibalistic frenzy. Directorate T begins to blame Directorate K, counterintelligence. The generals blame the scientists blame the spies. "You stole the wrong documents," the engineers scream. "We stole exactly what you asked for," the spies scream back. The confusion creates a paralysis of command. Decisions are delayed, projects are shelved. The fear of sabotage makes them hesitate to use even the technology that is working. This is the genius of the mystery. It is not just that things are breaking, it is the psychological warfare of uncertainty. A tank commander looks at his T-72 tank and wonders, will the autoloader jam because the Americans tweaked the design we copied? A radar operator looks at his screen and wonders, is that blip real, or is it American malware? The Soviet military machine, the largest in the world, is being dismantled by doubt. And amidst this chaos, the man named Farewell continues his work. He is not motivated by money. He is not motivated by ideology in the traditional sense. He is motivated by a deep, burning resentment against the system he serves. He wants to see it crumble. The incident in Siberia was just the fireworks. The real explosion is happening in the quiet shuffling of papers, in the dark street corners of Moscow, and in the brief, terrified handovers of microfilm. The Soviets are hunting for a high-tech solution to a high-tech problem. They are deploying their best mathematical minds to analyze the glitch. They are completely blind to the human element. As 1982 bleeds into 1983, the tension reaches a breaking point. The Americans seem to have an uncanny ability to expel Soviet diplomats exactly when they are about to make a drop. Spy rings that have operated for decades in France, Germany, and the UK suddenly go silent, rolled up by local authorities with surgical precision. The KGB realizes they are bleeding. They are hemorrhaging their most valuable asset, their eyes and ears in the West. Someone is talking. The glitch is not in the software. The glitch is in the hierarchy. But who? The suspect list is thousands of names long. To find the mole, they have to investigate their own elite. And that is a dangerous game in the Soviet Union. Accuse the wrong general and you end up in a gulag. So they tread carefully. Too carefully. While they hesitate, the Americans prepare the next phase of the operation. They have fed the Soviets the poison. Now they are going to watch it kill the patient. The stakes are no longer just about a pipeline or a radar system. The stakes are the survival of the Soviet intelligence apparatus itself. The mystery deepens. The KGB feels the noose tightening, but they cannot see the executioner. They are fighting a war in the shadows, swinging wildly at an enemy they cannot define. And all the while, the true source of their humiliation sits quietly in his office, stamping documents, reading the classified reports of the pipeline disaster, and perhaps allowing himself a very slight, very grim smile. The aftermath of the Siberian pipeline explosion is not a clean affair. It is a bureaucratic autopsy performed by men who are terrified of what they might find. In the weeks following the blast, the Kremlin orders a total lockdown on information. The scorched earth is cordoned off by KGB border troops. The engineers who witnessed the event are debriefed in windowless rooms, threatened with treason charges if they speak a word of the accident to their families. But silence does not fix the machines. Inside the Directorate T headquarters in Moscow, the mood shifts from panic to a cold, aggressive paranoia. The Director of Scientific Intelligence summons his department heads. The table is covered in reports of failures, not just the pipeline, but the radar blackouts, the brittle tank armor, the defective microchips. They are looking for a pattern. The investigation begins with a premise that is quintessentially Soviet. Someone is guilty. In their worldview, machines do not simply break. They are broken by someone. The initial theory is internal sabotage. The KGB suspects that dissidents within the scientific community are deliberately altering blueprints to embarrass the state. Teams of investigators descend on the design bureaus. They interrogate the lead aerodynamicists of the Sukhoi and Mikoyan design teams. They demand to know why the wind tunnel data for the new MiG-29 aircraft fighters does not match the performance of the prototypes. The scientists, trembling and exhausted, point to the data provided by the intelligence services. "We built what you told us to build," they plead. "The math is from the Americans. If the plane falls out of the sky, it is because the American math is wrong." This is an impossible answer for the KGB to accept. To accept that the American data is wrong is to accept that the KGB, the sword and shield of the party, has failed. It is easier to blame the scientists. Several high-ranking engineers are removed from their posts. Some vanish into the Gulag system, accused of wrecking and negligence. But even with new, loyal party members installed in the laboratories, the failures persist. The investigation widens. If it is not the scientists, it must be the factories. The KGB sends inspectors to the manufacturing plants in the Urals. They watch the assembly lines for the T-72 tanks. They scrutinize the metallurgy. They discover that the steel alloy used for the tank tracks, based on a stolen American formula, is cracking after only a few hundred miles of use. The inspectors analyze the chemical composition. It matches the stolen documents perfectly. This is where the investigation hits a wall of cognitive dissonance. The Soviets are holding the truth in their hands, the stolen secrets of the West, but the truth is lying to them. A new theory emerges, one that breeds a different kind of fear. The investigators begin to whisper that the Americans have developed a new generation of countermeasures that are invisible to the naked eye. They theorize that the Americans have embedded logic bombs into their technology latent defects that only trigger under specific conditions. This is a terrifying concept for the Soviet military. It means the enemy is not just on the battlefield, the enemy is inside the weapon itself. The paranoia spreads to the software sector. Soviet computer scientists, tasked with cloning the architecture of the IBM 360 and 370 mainframe computers, report maddening inconsistencies. They copy the circuitry of the American microchips atom by atom. They replicate the silicon wafers. But when they power up the Soviet clones, the calculations drift. The timing is off by nanoseconds. It drives them mad. They begin to believe the Americans are using materials that don't exist on the periodic table, or that they are using some form of quantum encryption that destroys the data when it is observed by an electron microscope. The KGB demands answers from their spies in the field. The residencies in Washington, New York, and San Francisco are ordered to verify the intelligence. "Go back to the source," Moscow demands. "Get the blueprints again. Check for alterations." The spies do as they are told. They return to their contacts, the greedy American contractors, the disgruntled engineers, the moles inside the defense firms. They pay thousands of dollars in cash. They receive new microfilms. They smuggle them out in diplomatic pouches. When these new documents arrive in Moscow, they are analyzed with desperate hope. And here is the masterstroke of the mystery. The new documents confirm the old documents. The data looks correct. The formulas look sound. The Soviets are trapped in a hall of mirrors. They cannot see the deception because the deception is comprehensive. They don't realize that the contacts their spies are meeting have been compromised. They don't realize that the CIA is now curating the library of secrets they are stealing. Instead of realizing they are being played, the KGB draws the wrong conclusion. The Americans are simply better. A dark legend begins to build within the Soviet intelligence community. They start to view American technology with a superstitious dread. They believe the Americans have achieved a level of sophistication where they can make laws of physics optional. This psychological impact is more devastating than the physical explosions. The Soviet Union relied on the strategy of fast follower. Let the Americans spend billions inventing it, then we steal it and build it cheaper. But if you cannot trust what you steal, the strategy collapses. The investigation stalls. The investigators are chasing phantom saboteurs and magical technology. They are looking for complex answers to a simple problem. Meanwhile, the crisis deepens. In 1982, a report reaches the desk of the General Secretary. It details the status of the Soviet chemical weapons program. They have been trying to replicate a specific American nerve agent bonded with a dispersal polymer. The stolen formula, when synthesized, produces a gas that is potent for only a few minutes before breaking down into harmless compounds. The military is furious. They have built warheads for missiles designed to carry this gas. Now, those warheads are useless metal tubes. The cost of the program is in the millions of rubles. The time lost is measured in years. The KGB's Directorate T is humiliated. Their reputation as the magicians who could produce any Western secret on demand is shattered. In a desperate attempt to regain control, the KGB launches Operation Ryan, Raketno Yadernoe Napadani, a massive intelligence-gathering operation designed to detect an imminent nuclear first strike. The logic is twisted, but consistent with their paranoia. If the Americans are sabotaging Soviet technology, it must be a prelude to war. They are softening up the target before the hammer falls. The atmosphere in the Kremlin becomes apocalyptic. The leadership, old and ailing men like Leonid Brezhnev and later Yuri Andropov, become convinced that the technological failures are part of a grand, aggressive strategy by the Reagan administration to disarm the Soviet Union before launching a surprise attack. They are right about the strategy, but wrong about the mechanism. They are looking for missiles in the sky, while the real attack is happening in the blueprints on their desks. The investigators finally turn their gaze to the one place they should have looked first: the pipeline of intelligence itself. Is it possible, a junior analyst dares to ask during a briefing, that the information is bad before it even reaches us? The room goes silent. To suggest this is to suggest that Line X, the pride of the KGB, has been penetrated. It suggests that the CIA knows who the spies are. It suggests a traitor of monumental proportions. The senior generals dismiss it. Impossible, they say. Our network is compartmentalized. Even if they caught one spy, they couldn't poison the entire stream. We are getting bad data from Boeing, from IBM, from General Dynamics, from deeper sources in France and Germany. No single traitor could compromise all of that. They are confident in their system. They are confident in the loyalty of their officers. They are wrong. They fail to understand the specific nature of the man they are hunting. They are looking for a classic mole, someone who sells a name for money. They are not looking for a man who handed over the Rosetta Stone of Soviet industrial espionage. The investigation circles the drain. The Soviets tighten security. They execute a few more innocent engineers. They implement rigorous retesting protocols that slow down production to a crawl. The Soviet economy, already groaning under the weight of inefficiency, begins to buckle. The cost of verifying every stolen secret destroys the economic advantage of stealing it. If you have to spend 5 years testing a stolen design to make sure it isn't a trap, you might as well have invented it yourself. The efficiency of the theft is gone. The parasite can no longer feed safely on the host. By 1983, the Soviet military-industrial complex is in a state of nervous breakdown. They have thousands of missiles, tanks, and planes, but they are terrified that when they push the button, nothing will happen. Or worse, that the missile will blow up in the silo. The investigation phase concludes with the Soviets exhausted, confused, and terrified. They have not solved the mystery. They have only mapped the extent of the disaster. But thousands of miles away, in a nondescript office building in Virginia, the mystery is not a mystery at all. It is a project. It has a name. And the men running it are about to turn the screw one last time. While the Soviets were chasing ghosts in the machine, the Americans were busy building the machine. While the Kremlin hunted for ghosts in Siberia and purged their own ranks in Moscow, the answer to their mystery was sitting inside a drab beige folder in a secure room in Washington, D.C. The year is 1981. The location is the old executive office building, just steps away from the White House. The atmosphere here is not one of panic, but of stunned, almost reverent silence. A small group of American intelligence officials, including CIA Director William Casey and a brilliant, bespectacled National Security Council advisor named Gus Weiss, are looking at a stack of documents that have just arrived from France. They are looking at the farewell dossier. To understand the explosion in Siberia, we must rewind the clock to the streets of Paris, 1980. The Soviet Union believes its intelligence apparatus is a fortress. They believe their officers are ideologically pure steel. But steel rusts. Vladimir Vetrov is a lieutenant colonel in the KGB. He is a senior officer in Directorate T, the Technology Theft Division. He is stationed in Moscow, but he has spent years in France. He loves Paris. He loves the wine, the fashion, the freedom, and he hates the Soviet Union. He hates the corruption. He hates the nepotism that saw him passed over for promotion in favor of men with better political connections but half his intelligence. He is a man driven not by a desire for money, but by a cold, vindictive rage. He wants to hurt the system that disrespected him. Vetrov does not defect. He does not run to an embassy and ask for asylum. That would be too small. He wants to stay inside the machine and destroy it. He reaches out to French intelligence, the DST. He offers them a trade. He will not give them political gossip. He will not give them the names of diplomats sleeping with mistresses. He gives them the shopping list. Over the course of several months, Vetrov photographs and hands over nearly 4,000 top-secret documents. He exposes the entire nervous system of the KGB's industrial espionage. When the French president, François Mitterrand, personally informs President Ronald Reagan of this windfall at the Ottawa summit in July 1981, the Americans are initially terrified. The documents reveal that the Soviet military is not being built by Soviet scientists, it is being built by American research. The scope is breathtaking. Vetrov's files list the names of more than 200 Line X officers stationed in embassies around the world. He identifies over 170 agents inside Western intelligence services. He provides the exact wish list of technologies the Soviets are targeting for the next 5 years. Radar systems for the F-15 Eagle aircraft, acoustic quieting technology for nuclear submarines, drilling technology for the Siberian pipeline, computer architecture for missile guidance. The Americans realize that the United States taxpayer has been funding the Soviet military buildup. It is a humiliating revelation. The immediate instinct of the FBI and the CIA is to swing the hammer. They want to arrest every spy, expel every diplomat, and shut down every leak. It is the natural reaction. Stop the bleeding. But Gus Weiss, the quiet strategist at the National Security Council, raises his hand. He proposes a different idea, a darker, more brilliant idea. Why stop them? Weiss argues. If we arrest them, the Soviets will just send new spies. We will be back to square one. We know what they want. We know where they're going to steal it. Why don't we help them? This is the birth of the most audacious counterintelligence operation of the Cold War. The project does not have a flashy name like Star Wars. It is simply known as the Farewell Dossier Operation. The logic is ruthless. The Soviets are addicted to Western technology. They trust it implicitly. They believe it is superior to anything they can produce. Weiss proposes that the US exploit this trust. We will give them exactly what they want, Weiss tells Reagan. But we will make it wrong. The plan is approved. The CIA, working in total secrecy with the FBI and the Department of Defense, contacts the American corporations that are being targeted by the KGB. They go to the CEOs of tech giants, energy companies, and aerospace firms. The KGB is trying to steal your designs, the government tells them. Let them. Under the supervision of the CIA, the engineers at these companies begin to alter the blueprints and the software code. They create Trojan horses. The goal is not to create technology that doesn't work. That would be too obvious. If a stolen radar doesn't turn on, the Soviets would know they were tricked. The genius of the American solution is that the technology does work for a while. They design computer chips that function perfectly for millions of cycles, passing every initial Soviet quality control test. But buried deep in the microarchitecture is a command to randomize the data processing after a specific time delay. They design turbine blueprints that look aerodynamically perfect, but contain minute structural flaws in the alloy composition specifications. The metal will hold under normal stress, but will shatter under combat conditions. And, most famously, they look at the software for the Trans-Siberian gas pipeline. The Soviets need automated control systems to manage the pressure in the pipes. They are stealing the software from a Canadian company with American ties. The CIA programmers insert a few lines of rogue code into the stolen version. The code is designed to be a sleeper agent. It is instructed to operate normally during the installation and testing phases. It allows the gas to flow. It allows the pumps to run. It waits until the system is fully operational, until the pipeline is pressurized and pumping millions of rubles worth of gas. Then, it is programmed to reset the pump speeds and valve settings to produce pressures far beyond the burst strength of the pipe joints and welds. This is the American ingenuity that the Soviets never saw coming. It is a weaponization of the supply chain. The operation requires a staggering level of coordination. It is not just about one piece of software. The CIA begins poisoning the well across the entire spectrum of Soviet theft. They feed the Soviets flawed stealth technology designs, leading them down expensive dead ends in aerodynamic research. They provide doctored plans for chemical factories. They allow the theft of advanced space shuttle heat shield designs that are actually rejected, heavier, and less effective versions of the real NASA tiles. This creates a devastating economic multiplier effect. The Soviet Union pours billions of rubles into building factories based on these stolen designs. They build assembly lines, they train workers, they produce weapons, and only then, when the money is spent and the weapon is fielded, does it fail. It is economic warfare of the highest order. The Americans are not just breaking machines, they are bankrupting the Soviet state. They are forcing the USSR to burn its limited resources on junk. Back in Moscow, the Line X spies are celebrating. They are sending home record amounts of intelligence. They are being given medals and commendations. They believe they are stripping the West bare. Vladimir Vetrov, the man who made it all possible, continues to photograph documents in his office. He meets his French handler in cars, in parks, passing film rolls that seal the fate of his own country. He knows what is happening. He knows the secrets his colleagues are stealing are poisoned. There is a grim irony in his work. He is feeding the beast that he wants to kill, knowing that the food is toxic. The Americans, meanwhile, watch and wait. They have the unique satisfaction of knowing exactly when and where the disasters will happen. When the satellite detects the explosion in Siberia, the analysts at the CIA don't panic like the generals at NORAD initially did. They nod. The software worked, they say, but the pipeline is just the most visible fire. The real devastation is silent. It is the MiG-29 aircraft pilot who realizes his radar is ghosting. It is the submarine captain who realizes his hull is groaning too loudly. It is the realization that the entire foundation of Soviet military power is built on quicksand. This strategy highlights the fundamental difference between the two superpowers in the 1980s. The Soviet Union is rigid, centralized, and paranoid. The United States is flexible, innovative, and collaborative. The Americans use their open society, the very thing the Soviets thought was a weakness, as a trap. They use their private companies, their free market, as a weapon. The trap is set, the poison has been swallowed, the machines are built. Now, the Americans prepare for the final act. They don't just want the machines to break, they want the Soviet leadership to know they were tricked. They want to break the will of the Kremlin. The source phase is the story of a silent, invisible invasion. No Marines landed on Soviet soil, no bombers flew over Soviet airspace. But the damage inflicted by Gus Weiss, Vladimir Vetrov, and a handful of programmers was more severe than a tank division. They turned the Soviet Union's greatest strength, its espionage network, into its fatal weakness. As 1983 approaches, the CIA prepares to pull the curtain back. The mystery is about to be solved for the Soviets, but the answer will be more painful than the confusion. The unraveling of the Soviet mystery does not begin with a high-tech breakthrough or a brilliant deduction by a KGB detective. It begins with a bottle of champagne and a knife in a parked car in Moscow. It is February 1982. Vladimir Vetrov, the man who has single-handedly compromised the entire technological future of the Soviet Union, is cracking under the pressure. Living a double life has eroded his sanity. In a drunken rage, during a tryst with his mistress in his car, he snaps. He stabs her. When a bystander, a fellow KGB officer, as fate would have it, knocks on the window to intervene, Vetrov stabs him to death. He is arrested not for treason, but for murder. For months, the KGB has the greatest traitor in their history sitting in a regular prison cell, and they do not know it. They believe he is just another violent drunkard who disgraced the uniform. They have no idea that the man weeping in the interrogation room is the architect of the pipeline disaster. But outside the prison walls, the clock is ticking down to zero. The shock moment for the Soviet leadership arrives in waves, culminating in a tsunami of realization that drowns the Kremlin in 1983. The first wave hits in April. France, acting on the intelligence Vetrov provided before his arrest, strikes. In a coordinated move that leaves Moscow reeling, the French government expels 47 Soviet diplomats in a single day. 47. It is a massacre of the intelligence network. These are not just embassy staff, they are the elite handlers of Line X. They are the men and women stealing the secrets. The KGB is stunned. They scramble to understand how the French knew exactly who to target. They didn't expel the cultural attachés or the cooks, they expelled the spies. The precision is terrifying. Then, the Americans strike. Across the United States, the FBI rolls up networks that have existed for a decade. In Moscow, the realization begins to dawn. This is not a series of unfortunate events, this is a purge. Inside the KGB headquarters, a special investigative team finally digs into Vetrov's background. From his prison cell, hoping to bargain for his life, or perhaps simply resigned to his fate, Vetrov writes a confession. He admits to his contact with the French. He admits to handing over the shopping list. When the report of Vetrov's confession reaches the desk of Yuri Andropov, the blood drains from the room. The generals and the intelligence directors stare at the list of documents Vetrov gave to the West. They see the dates, they see the specific technologies requested. Radar components, 1982. Pipeline software, 1981. Computer architecture, 1981. And then they look at the dates of the failures. The pipeline explosion, 1982. The radar blackouts, 1982. The connection snaps into place with the violence of a thunderclap. The silence in the room is the silence of men who realize they are standing in a trap that has already sprung. They were not just caught stealing, they were fed. The shock is total. The psychological impact is far greater than the loss of any single agent. The Soviet leadership realizes that for the past 2 years, the CIA has been their chief supply officer. They look at the computers running their air defense grid. Are these real? Or did the Americans send us the poisoned ones? They look at the turbines in their power plants. Are these safe, or are they time bombs? They look at the chemical formulas for their new weapons. Do these work, or will they kill our own troops? Paranoia transforms into paralysis. The order goes out to the entire Soviet military-industrial complex. Stop. Stop the integration of Western technology. Stop the cloning of microchips. Stop the installation of the new turbines. It is a catastrophic command for an economy that relies on momentum. Factories grind to a halt. Research projects that are 90% complete are frozen because the engineers cannot verify if the foundation data is valid. The Soviet Union has spent billions of rubles stealing, copying, and building these systems. Now they have to spend billions more to tear them apart to check for bugs they might never find. The futile response of the Soviet machine is tragic to behold. Desperate to salvage the situation, the Kremlin orders a massive quarantine of Western tech. They attempt to build clean rooms where Soviet scientists can reverse engineer the American malware to remove it. But this reveals the depth of the American victory. The Soviet scientists do not understand the technology well enough to debug it. They stole the product, but they didn't steal the process. They don't know how the source code was written, so they don't know which lines are the trap. Is the glitch in line 10,000 or line 10 million? In the aviation sector, the panic is acute. The Soviets had been rushing to counter the American F-15 Eagle and F-16 Fighting Falcon aircraft. They had accelerated the development of their own fighters by copying radar and avionics. Now, terrified that the avionics will blind the pilots in a real war, they attempt to strip the Western components out of the MiG-29 aircraft and Su-27 aircraft designs. They try to replace them with indigenous Soviet technology, but the indigenous technology is 10 years behind. The result is a generation of Soviet fighters that are aerodynamically brilliant, beautiful, maneuverable birds but electronically lobotomized. They have to install heavier, older, analog radars to replace the suspect digital ones. This adds weight. It reduces range. It destroys the performance of the aircraft. They know it is inferior, but it is the only thing they can trust. The most humiliating example of this futile response is the Buran space shuttle program. The Soviets were terrified of the US space shuttle. They believed it was a space bomber. So, they ordered their engineers to build a copy. The espionage network stole the designs for the NASA shuttle's thermal protection tiles and the onboard flight computers. But after the farewell revelation, the Soviet engineers were too terrified to use the stolen data. They suspected the heat shield designs were flawed, which they were. The Americans had subtly altered the chemical composition specs in the stolen docks to make them brittle. So, the Soviet engineers had to start from scratch. They wasted years reinventing the wheel because they couldn't trust the blueprints they had already paid for. When the Buran finally flew in 1988, it was a technological marvel, but it was a marvel born of immense, wasteful duplication. It flew once, unmanned, and then the empire that built it collapsed. The shock of the farewell dossier destroyed the Soviet belief in their own system. They had always told themselves that they were smarter than the Americans. The Americans spend the money, we steal the fruit. It was a point of pride. Now, they realized the Americans thought they were fools. The Americans had treated them like children, handing them a loaded gun with a plugged barrel and waiting for them to pull the trigger. The anger in the KGB is directed inward. The trust is broken. Line X officers are recalled to Moscow and interrogated. Did you know? The generals scream at them. Did you know the Americans were feeding you garbage? The spies swear they didn't know, but their careers are over. The network is dismantled. By 1984, the Soviet military technology pipeline has constricted. They are forced to rely solely on their own domestic innovation, which has been starved of funding for decades in favor of the theft program. They cannot catch up. The gap widens. The Americans, meanwhile, watching from across the ocean, see the results. They see the slowdown in Soviet deployments. They hear the silence of the spies. They see the satellite photos of the incomplete factories. Gus Weiss, the architect of the plan, writes a classified memo. He notes that the Soviet Union has effectively sanctioned itself. By trying to protect themselves from the American Trojan horses, they have imposed a technology embargo on their own economy that is far more effective than anything the UN could have enforced. The mystery is solved. The Soviets know what happened. They know why the pipeline blew up. They know why the radar failed. But knowing the answer doesn't save them. It only confirms their doom. They are fighting a 21st century war with mid-20th century tools, and the bridge to the future, the stolen tech, has just been blown up. As the reality sets in, the Soviet leadership looks at the numbers. They look at their oil revenue, which is dropping. They look at their military spending, which is rising to fix the mess. And they look at the American economy, which is booming. The realization is not just military. It is existential. They cannot win. Vladimir Vetrov, the man who triggered the avalanche, is sitting in his cell. He will be executed in 1985, shot in the back of the head in a basement in Moscow. He will die a traitor to the Soviet Union. But in the eyes of history, he is the man who broke the KGB's back. The shock has passed. Now comes the lingering, painful death of the superpower. The explosion in Siberia was a physical scar. But the true wound, the mortal wound, was inflicted 4,000 miles away, in the skies over Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. It is June 1982. The farewell operation is in full swing. The Soviets are already paranoid about their technology. They are desperately trying to scrub their stolen blueprints of American sabotage. But in the halls of the Kremlin there is still a lingering hope. They hope that perhaps the damage is contained. They hope that their sheer volume of fire, their massive batteries of surface-to-air missiles, will still hold the line against the West. Then, the Israelis attack. In the span of 2 hours, the Israeli Air Force, flying American F-15 Eagle and F-16 aircraft and using American electronic warfare technology, engages the Syrian Air Defense Network. The Syrians are the Soviet Union's proxy. They are armed with the best export-model Soviet technology available, MiG-21 and MiG-23 aircraft, and the feared SAM-6 mobile missile batteries. The Soviets have assured the Syrians that the SAM-6 is invincible. They have assured them that the radar systems based on technology stolen from the West years prior, are impenetrable. The result is not a battle, it is an execution. The Israelis destroy 17 of the 19 Soviet-made missile batteries in a single afternoon. In the air, the slaughter is even more absolute. The killer statistic that lands on the desk of the Soviet General Staff the next morning is a number so lopsided it looks like a typo: 82-0. 82 Soviet-built Syrian jets have been shot down, 0 Israeli jets have been lost. In Moscow, Marshal Nikolai Ogakov, the chief of the General Staff, stares at the report. He is not looking at a Syrian defeat. He is looking at the future of the Soviet Union, and it is burning on the ground. This is the moment the farewell operation truly kills the Soviet superpower. The Bekaa Valley turkey shoot confirms everything the farewell dossier implied. The technology gap is not just real, it is insurmountable. The Americans are not just ahead, they are playing a different game entirely. The Soviet radar screens were white with jamming. Their missiles couldn't lock on. Their planes were blind. Why? Because the Americans knew the frequencies. They knew the chip architectures. They knew the glitches because the Soviets had stolen the glitches and built their defense network around them. The psychological impact of this realization shatters the Soviet will to fight. If the Soviet Union cannot win a conventional war because their tech is compromised, their only option is nuclear war. But nuclear war is suicide. So, they are left with no options. The economic impact is the final nail in the coffin. The farewell operation forces the Soviet Union to bankrupt itself. In the mid-1980s, President Reagan announces the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, derisively known as Star Wars. It is a plan to build a space-based missile shield. Scientifically, in the 1980s, it is largely a fantasy. It is a bluff. But the Soviets cannot call the bluff. Because of the farewell dossier, they know that American technology is capable of things they cannot understand. They have seen their pipeline explode via software. They have seen their radar go blind. If the Americans say they can build laser satellites, the terrified Soviet leadership has to believe them. So, the Soviet Union attempts to compete. They pour billions of rubles they do not have into a counter-SDI program. They divert funds from agriculture, from infrastructure, from housing, to build a shield against a weapon that doesn't exist. They are chasing a ghost, driven by the fear instilled by the poison technology. This is the brilliance of the macro theme of this story. The Cold War was not won by a missile launch, it was won by a crisis of confidence. The Soviet system was built on the idea of the command economy, centralized control. But it was also built on the parasite economy. They believed they could bypass the hard work of innovation by perfecting the art of theft. They thought they were being efficient. But the farewell dossier proved that when you live as a parasite, you are at the mercy of the host. If the host decides to drink poison, the parasite dies first. The systemic failure was total. By relying on stolen Western tech, the Soviets had atrophied their own scientific muscles. When the flow of secrets turned toxic, they realized they had forgotten how to walk on their own. The investigation into the mystery of the pipeline explosion eventually faded, but the silence it left behind was the silence of a dying empire. Epilogue. Vladimir Vetrov, the man who signed the death warrant of the Soviet Union, did not live to see the wall fall. He spent his final years in the damp misery of the Lefortovo prison. He was interrogated endlessly. In the end, he was not treated as a master spy by his captors, but as a common criminal. On January 23, 1985, he was taken to a basement room. He was made to kneel. A single bullet was fired into the back of his head. He was buried in an unmarked grave, his name erased from the records. The KGB believed they had solved the problem. They had plugged the leak. They had executed the traitor. But they were wrong. You cannot kill an idea with a bullet, and you cannot fix a broken system with a firing squad. The gas pipeline in Siberia was repaired. The crater was filled. The snow covered the scorch marks. And today, the wind howls over the tundra as if nothing ever happened. But if you listen closely to the history of the late 20th century, you can hear the echo of that explosion. It is the sound of the Iron Curtain cracking. The Soviet Union collapsed on December 26, 1991. It fell not because of an invasion, but because it rotted from the inside. It fell because its leaders looked at their own hands, at their own tanks, their own computers, their own rockets, and realized they held nothing but rust and sand. They had stolen the fire of the gods, only to find that it burned them. The mystery of the fireball in the Siberian wilderness is no longer a mystery. It is a lesson. It is a reminder that in the war for the future, the most dangerous weapon is not a nuclear bomb. It is a line of code, a misplaced decimal point, and the arrogance of believing that you can build a kingdom on stolen land. The farewell dossier remains the greatest deception in the history of espionage. It was the moment the West stopped fighting the bear and simply tricked the bear into eating itself. And it all started with a man who just wanted to destroy the machine. He succeeded.